I've got to be the happiest guy in America tonight.
Well, I just want to say this in presenting the plaque. Presenting this plaque, I want to say first that the AP and the UPI will name Texas #1, as we know, after this game. And this is a great honor in the 100th year of football. I also want to say that having seen this game, what convinced me that Texas deserves that is the fact that you won a tough one. For a team to be behind 14-0 and then not to lose its cool and to go on to win, that proves you deserve to be #1, and that's what you are.
He is. Manziel from the end zone, deep down the middle, got a man! Evans with a foot race. Michael Evans, one man. Sunseri cannot stop him. Touchdown.
And welcome everyone to Lone Star Yell Fight, where we're talking all things college football, Texas Aggies, Texas Longhorns, from the greatest country in these United States. All right, everybody, welcome back to Lone Star Yell Fight. Mr. 12th Man, Andy Tom Chesson, is back with us after a week off. I am, of course, your host, Jim Christopher, who doesn't take the week off. Andy, you guys have A&M is up this week with New Mexico State. Now, look, is this the kind of game, like if this were played at the beginning of the season, if you don't beat them by 35, it's considered not a great game, or is the goal to just get healthy or stay out of this thing healthy?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Reed for setting his price so high that you couldn't get him back. So that left me a slot to slide right back in. I don't know what the going rate for high school commentary is, but it's clearly better than what I could provide. So bravo to him, and good for him for standing for his morals and, holding out for his dollar.
Yeah, he doesn't got a bet for less than $1,000 is what he told me. So I don't know.
So let me tell you how excited I am about this New Mexico State game. I had written this whole thing for the show about how it's going to be the Bob Davie Bowl and how it's really interesting that in college football we really get attached to offensive and defensive coordinators or vice versa, and we hate them, but we know them by name compared to the NFL where I couldn't tell you 90% of any of those guys.
Yeah.
And then I remember that Bob Davie's coached at New Mexico, not New Mexico State. So all that's out the window, but it does go to tell you how insignificant this game and any result of it other than a loss is going to be. Yeah, so to your question, this game matters not at all. You just don't want to come out with any injuries, and it should be a game where you see 2 or 3 quarterbacks. That should be the goal. Your starters get out by halftime. Maybe you have them come out, and I don't even think you have to do this at, what is this, game 9? I don't think you have to do the let's come out after halftime and get one more series in thing. I don't think that's necessary. I expect to see Marcel Reed starting. I expect to see Connor Wigman starting this third quarter. And Jalen Henderson, who's our third string, who's been hurt all year, maybe he gets some time in the fourth quarter. Who knows? The only thing we won't be able to do is empty the bench on running back because we only have 2. Which is going to be an interesting thing for the rest of the year.
Or you have no choice to empty the bench.
And to be honest, we have 1.5 because Emmitt Smith's son is a really good guy, but EJ is not a guy who can. He's not his dad, which is an unfair comparison. It's hard to be the son of a Hall of Famer, but he's just not a guy who can handle more than 5 or 6 carries a game. I think he got 8 in the game against South Carolina out of necessity, and it didn't get better as time went on.
You think that's partly because he's just young and hasn't grown into his body yet? Because this is freshman year, right?
No, he's a senior.
What?
He's a senior transfer. He played at Stanford for 3 years.
Oh, huh. Because he made such a big deal when he signed with A&M. I didn't realize it was a transfer situation. Oh well,
this is the field of looking for something to be excited about. We signed a Dallas Cowboys great. That's why there was a big fanfare and deal made out of it that had nothing to do with his performance or ability to. I think there was some outside hope that some of his problems at Stanford were that Stanford was pretty lousy while he was there, and also he was hurt a lot. So I think the reality is that he has a limit on his talent, and he gets the most out of it, but it's just not a lot.
Speaking of getting the most out of their talent, how about former Aggie, former Cowboy, Dat Win, huh? That guy was awesome.
I mean, this is the kind of thing we talk about when we play New Mexico State. We're going to talk about a guy who literally stopped playing 25 years ago. He also owns Chick-fil-A franchises in San Antonio.
Huh. Does he really? That's fascinating.
Yeah, but this is the level of what this game means. And I realize that you guys don't have you don't have one of these games late in the year this season, right?
No, we don't.
Okay, so this is until the SEC goes to 9 games. I'm not trying to mansplain this to you. You will get one of these games, and anybody you know from a Big 10 school or even a Big 12 school will criticize you up and down the road about playing such a shitty team so late in the year. It's because we only play 8 conference games, and you got to play somebody.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I guess it'll be better for you in Oklahoma because you didn't have you had years to plan for it. We got in and had a year to basically figure out schedules for 5 years, and so you got a lot of Tarleton State and Sam Houston and schools like that. So at least New Mexico State is a Division I school. They're 2-7. They're not very good. They're not very good in a good league. I'm amazed that it's a 6:30 game, frankly.
Yeah.
Which will be nice. It'll be the first actual, almost feels like fall game of the year in week 10.
Week 10. Yeah, there's even talk that Dallas might open the roof all the way, which is the first time since 2016. So that's nuts. All right, Texas coming off dismantling Florida. Obviously, an understaffed Florida team, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. For me, though, I saw what I needed to see. They should have dismantled Florida, and they did dismantle Florida. You also saw Quinn Ewers get much more comfortable in the vertical passing game, including 2 touchdowns that were clearly dropped. So I felt pretty good going out of this game, knowing that you've got 3 games left. The one at the end of the season is mathematically a tougher matchup than even this week and particularly next week. But just as a distance observer, did you see what you needed to see out of Texas versus Florida?
So Florida is this team that has talent. They aren't able to put it together, and I'm a little bit baffled that they've decided that Napier's going to get another year. I get it.
So is every Florida fan.
I know, but I assume that is to hold on to DJ Lagaway and some of the other recruiting class, because they've had a couple of good recruiting classes in a row, and I don't know what it looks like for this year, but I can only assume they're giving him some grace for injuries and some other things that have happened. But they're a team that does have talent in certain areas, quarterback not being one of them at this point, as I got blasted for saying on Twitter, I guess last week. Y'all were playing a quarterback who probably wouldn't start for most 6A high schools in Texas. And I don't think I'm wrong on that. He was a guy who transferred from Yale.
I still don't get why you give up an education from Yale to go sit the bench as a third stringer in Florida.
I'm assuming NIL, and I can't imagine that's a real thing for him, but I don't know. Why does any 19, 20-year-old do anything in life?
Fair.
Women.
Yeah, fair. Well, that's probably true.
No, I think that they're the kind of team that if you let them hang around, they can make life a little bit difficult for you in a game. And we've seen that in some games this year. And to Napier's credit, that's, I think, what you've seen this year. They've been a little bit scrappier than probably they should be. You guys put your foot on their throats in the first quarter and didn't let up. And that's what you should do with that team. Especially knowing that they have a running back that could hurt you. They were starting a freshman wide receiver, a redshirt freshman wide receiver. They've been decimated by injuries this year. And so Texas did exactly what a school in Texas's position should do and just put their foot on their throats and not let up until the end of the fourth quarter. And that's bravo. That's what you should be doing at that point. I hope that we have that kind of killer instinct with Auburn in 2 weeks.
So Texas now rolls into Arkansas, which, this is one of those games where
it's a rivalry game, Jim.
It's exactly right. One of those games where one team really is fired up about it and the other one has to find Arkansas on a map. However, that also leads to the potential to sleepwalking through the game. Now, I'm going to assume 51-20 2 years ago is going to help prevent that. But how do you see this game going? Texas is a 12-point favorite, and ESPN gives them a 85% chance of winning.
I don't know what ESPN's numbers really mean, because I don't think anybody really understands their algorithm. But I think it's safe to say that Texas has a better than fair chance of winning this game. I don't know what you're going to get from Taylon Green from Arkansas. I don't know if he's healthy. If he can't run, he's very one-dimensional. And I'm stating the obvious. If you take away his second dimension, he's one-dimensional. It's early here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it is.
Or late, depending on your point of view.
Right.
But Taylon Green is the difference in that team being good or not being good. And I just don't think he's healthy enough to make a difference against your defense this week. I do think Arkansas's defense is better than what Florida put out on the field, so it'll be a step up from what you've faced in the last couple of weeks, maybe. They've got a good offensive or good defensive line, and will be able to get after Ewers if Ewers takes too long to get rid of the ball. If Ewers doesn't do that, if you guys are smart and rely on the run game to pound Arkansas, I think that you win this game handily. I think you win the game handily anyway. It's a matter of how hard you want to make life on yourself and how hard Sark wants to make life on his offense. Because I do think Sark still gets in this mode of I've got to maintain a certain balance of passing and running, and that's great and noble. But when you can run the ball and win the game, run the ball and win the game.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about something, though, and it was something that really showed its head in the Georgia game for Texas, and then it showed its head again in the Vanderbilt game, where the Longhorns rely on a zone blocking scheme, and it seems to be not as effective as last year. And there was a big talk about how you lost some senior leadership, and now the seniors that are expected to lead the offensive line might not even know what their assignments are. And I don't think it's going to bug us this week or next week, but it probably will bug us against A&M. And so you think that's something they can fix, or do you think that is what it is and you're going to have to just live with it?
So when you watch a Texas game this year, you will hear about the dominant and great talent that is on the offensive line. And I don't disagree with that completely. Where I have a problem is I think you have two, maybe three guys that are NFL guys and the other two that aren't. And I think teams have learned how to pick their battles. I don't think you go after Banks if you don't have to, when you can go after the guard right next to him and get through to the quarterback or stuff the run. And so I think you can scheme around to some extent two good guys on an offensive line, and maybe last year you had four good guys on an offensive line. Not to say those other three guys aren't good. I just don't think they're as good as what you put on the field. And as we've talked about, when you put on that helmet and you're playing next to a guy like Kelvin Banks, I think there's some shine that comes off on you, whether you deserve it or not. So I think there's a reputation that has been given to the offensive line of Texas that hasn't necessarily been earned, but you also haven't had anybody really challenge you outside of Georgia. And to an extent, Vanderbilt a little bit was able to get some penetration. There have been some schools, but I think you really have to scheme to do that. The good news for Texas, I guess, is that your defensive backfield is really, really good. So your wide receivers are really, really good. So when the offensive line fails, and fails is in quotes, if Ewers can get the ball out, there's usually a lot of pickup, a lot of yards after catch, because he doesn't take a long time. So he doesn't necessarily need a pocket to hold for 7, 8, 9 seconds. He's usually got the ball out when he's on within 3 seconds. And I think that's usually a good way for me to tell if you're going to get the first quarter Ewers that I've been talking about this year or the second quarter Ewers. First quarter Ewers, it's more like 5-ish seconds that he's taken to scan the field and go through his reads. And second quarter Ewers is kind of like, 2-3 seconds. I know where I'm going, and then the ball's getting out, and there's a lot of room for my guy to run because I put it in the right place. And I know it's not going to happen, but it's almost like if you could get Ewers one more year of development where he was really comfortable in his reads and his receivers being where they need to be, I think you'd be talking about a guy who has Heisman level talent. That's clearly not going to happen for him this year.
Yeah.
because everybody assumes he's going to the NFL, and he probably should at this point. And I think the Texas coaching staff is ready for the Arch Manning era. The fan base certainly is, especially
Yes, sir. Yeah,
after any non-touchdown drive. I see that Longhorn Twitter is screaming for Arch.
we're a fickle people. The other thing too about the blocking scheme that Sark was talking about is it's really affecting the ability for the running backs to get outside. They're doing a great job running between the tackles, but the outside run game hasn't been there. They've been relying on screens and stuff to the wide receiver, which has been effective. But there's just one other area where it's nice to at least see the fact that you're rolling like this and you can improve.
Yeah. I also think that your fan base needs to keep in mind that you're on basically your third string running back. I know Jaden Blue plays, and I guess he starts, but every time I look at the TV,
Yeah,
it
he's
looks
lost
like
touches.
But it looks like Whitmer.
Yeah,
Is that his name?
Who's
It
been
looks
putting
like
the ball on the
he's your.
ground?
It looks like he's your primary back, and
Mhm.
frankly, he came out of nowhere because he was your third string guy or fourth string guy, maybe coming into the season. Uh, yeah, I think that makes it harder to run. I think the blocking scheme is certainly part of that, but I think you're down the list a little bit on your running back talent that's available right now. So that probably plays into it as well. But I assume Sark knows more about his offense than I do. I'll give him that one. Good job, Sark.
Well, but Longhorn Twitter knows more about his offense than Sark does. So, I mean, why aren't we listening to those guys? Hey, before I wanted one more Quinn Ewers thing. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I can't help but look, Quinn Ewers has been on commercials now, and he is not good. Although he's better in the national ads than like the local lawyer ad where he's mathematically awful. But I have to appreciate his most recent Fansville ad when he's playing the deputy being asked to call for backup, and he refuses to call for backup no matter how good his hair is and whether he has famous relatives. And I just got to say that hilarious, right? Like they would do that.
It's always good when you see somebody develop their talent over time. Because you're right. Those first few commercials, or even the print ads where he was wearing what I can only assume is a Canadian tuxedo, there's a lot of denim in it. He's gotten better at that particular skill, and hopefully that serves him well at the next level.
Yeah, I love the playful shot at Arch Manning, even though he's
I
got
don't think
great
there's
hair.
a better campaign over the last 5-6 years than the Fansville campaign.
No, I mean, I that's definitely something like I almost look forward to them because it's like I'm watching a show and I'm just ready to see what happens next.
It is interesting because we do the live sports is the one place where you can't get away from commercials.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to talk like an old man here for a second, but we're of a similar generation where the commercials during live TV or broadcast TV, that was an important part of that, and we used to have commercials that we really liked and we talked about, and there was a time where they were even televising the award shows for advertisements.
Yeah,
because it's that big of the culture, and now we're in the fast forward streaming culture where you can avoid them a lot. Live sports is one of the places you can't, so it's good that they're putting one of their better products in that venue.
Yeah.
Because I think Dr. Pepper and whoever, whatever ad agency is managing that for them, really do a good job with that.
I mean, I remember you brought that up, and the minute I thought about was my favorite. I ordered the Bud Light commercials from the 80s and 90s when you had like Bob Uecker showed up and Darth Vader showed up at one of them. I mean, those were great.
The whole series of Miller Lite ads was fantastic. And I know I was young enough where I didn't know who half those. I mean, who knew who Alex Karras was before Webster? But
right.
That was great. You would. I mean, kids today would not know who Mean Joe Green was, and everybody our age knows who Mean Joe Green was, not because he was a Steelers great Hall of Famer and fighting North Texas Eagle or whatever the hell they are, but because he gave a kid a jersey because the kid gave him a Coke. We all remember that. Those kind of things don't exist anymore. Now we have Brian Bosworth playing a sheriff, and he's fantastic.
He's kind of good. Yeah, it almost makes you want to readdress his ill-fated acting career. Maybe Quinn does have a second career after all. Speaking of
Black Hammer.
I mean, look on it, and honestly, Brian Bosworth is one of the greatest sort of genre films of all time. I mean, he's in They Live, and that movie's fantastic, but it's almost Oh no, that's Roddy Piper. Never mind.
That's Roddy Piper.
Yeah, they all look the same to me. Mullets are
No,
mullets.
Bosworth, his acting career was pretty much trying to play an NFL linebacker until Bo Jackson derailed him.
That's right. Oh man, talk about an end of a career. Hey, one of the things I want to talk about though is there's a lot of drama with the latest college football rankings, and I'm gonna ask this question to you with the following caveats. I understand I understand that it's how Texas in through one view, it's problematic that they are ranked higher than Georgia, considering Georgia beat them. To which I would say, please call 2004 Jim, who had his Longhorns beat the Oklahoma Sooners and still didn't go to the national championship game. But this is what you asked for. And so the drama is, for those of you not watching, is that right now Georgia's 12th. They're either going to be higher or lower. Like, they're not going to stay at 12. They lose this weekend, it's over. But because of the way they line things up, they wouldn't get in. BYU would, because even though they're lower ranked, they would be the Big 12 champion. This is what I think every college football wanted. They wanted some recognition of actually winning your conference. This is just going to happen, and you have to be okay with it.
Well, and I don't think there's it's one of the, how do I phrase this? College football is always an inequitable sport. There are better conferences and there are worse conferences. But as we move towards a new world order in college football, where you are going to try to have a unified front and try to give teams credit for winning a conference, regardless of what conference that is, that means teams are going to get left out that are name brands. And I think the issue is not necessarily that Georgia could get left out because of their resume. It's that Georgia and their name brand could get left out, and that bothers ESPN, who owns the playoff broadcasts.
Sure.
They want the name brand teams to be in. I think that they will find that over time, when you have a 4-game playoff like we've had, or even the BCS, I do understand that Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, maybe a couple of others, but not many, have a certain panache and they draw ratings. And so regardless of whether or not they always deserve to be there, they're going to get extra consideration. One of the things I love about the 12-team playoff is that your record is going to matter. Winning your conference is going to matter. Getting in that field of 12 is going to matter. And that means there's going to be some name brands left out. And frankly, if you've got a bunch of 1- and 2-loss teams, you can't justify a 3-loss team getting in. That it just shouldn't work. Now, the arguments I've seen are the extreme cases. It's not even the BYU. It's what if Army gets in over Georgia? Army's undefeated right now.
Yeah, and that's part of the goal was to.
And that's you should get credit for being undefeated. And in the prior system, Army had no chance to do anything but end up in whatever bowl wasn't one of the 3 playoff bowls.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, though, and unlike Major League Baseball, at least with this 12-team playoff, it allows other teams to become name brands, right? Like,
yeah,
there was a time when nobody watched Alabama football, right? Like after the 70s until Saban got there, it wasn't really a name brand anymore. So that's at least something that can happen.
I hope we don't have Alabama people watching this show, because they will violently remind you that they won the national championship in 1992 and the
Hey, they won it in 2009, and I'm still bitter, so they can go.
Yeah. No, you're right, but I don't even think it's the fans that are driving that conversation as much as the talking heads driving the conversation, because they don't know how to follow a team that they haven't followed for years. Yeah. They don't know how to go learn about BYU and pump them up and promote them the way they pump up a Georgia or an Alabama or a Texas, to be frank. Yeah. And A&M has gotten some of that shine, certainly not to the level of those teams that I mentioned. So I'm not pretending that we haven't gotten some benefit of the doubt, whether we've deserved it or not over the last few years. But I think they do need to learn. And I think you will see over time, probably not this year, because there'll be some pain about it and Georgia will get left out and Kirk Herbstreit will cry. Big old alligator tears about it. But I think you're going to see that it's going to get like the NCAA tournament in basketball, where it is exciting to see new teams and have that Cinderella team go up and get an upset and see a team that you've never heard of come out of nowhere and make a splash on a national scene that they don't normally get the opportunity to. That to me is more exciting and frankly a better product than constantly watching Alabama beat up on Ohio State.
Yeah, and what I think the thing I was thinking about is really kind of sucking some of the fun out of watching Indiana having the best season, not on a basketball court in the history of their school. And it's almost it's almost like just let those fans enjoy what's happening. And Georgia, for as much as they did beat Texas and flatly completely outplayed Texas, they've not been perfect. They've had bad quarterback play.
No.
We can now call it bad quarterback play. Like
Yeah.
you can't even just say it was one game anymore. I think it's 12 turnovers in his last 4 or something like that. It's ridiculous. So it just seems like you're sucking the fun out of it. For the reason you expanded the playoff was because you wanted to make sure it didn't become what you're talking about. The same 4 teams every year, and those fan bases are only the ones that are watching.
Well, that's what it had become. I mean, if you look at the very brief playoff era, it was Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and then pick a team out of like 3 other possibilities. Georgia came in there at the end and kind of took Alabama's spot. Georgia got left out last year, and there was much whining and gnashing of teeth and nailing it. And the same thing with Florida State. And I like the new format in that it's not going to enable a team to be left out because it doesn't look like they're going to be exciting for the bowl game or the playoff game. So I think the media is going to have to get over it, and they're going to have to learn to expand their view on what college football is. There will be a time, and I know it's a possibility right now, Washington State could be 11-1, win the Pac-12. They won't get one of the buys, but I mean, that's a major conference according to how the NCAA handles this crap. So they still call the Big 12 a major conference, so why not?
They do. Yeah. Well, they have a lot of teams in there. That's at least something. More than 12, like everyone
Southwest
else.
Texas State made it yet?
I don't think they have. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I want to talk about one game before we get out of here, though, and that is this week. It is Tennessee and Georgia. You could argue, at least for Georgia, this is win or go home for them. I don't know that it's that for Tennessee, but probably, I guess. Although Tennessee could still end up winning the SEC championship, and that would obviously help. But how do you see this game right now? Georgia's a 10-point favorite, which seems big to me for having a quarterback that can't. Like Carson Beck right now, he's at 17 TDs on the season and 12 picks, and that's not counting fumbles. So I just don't know how you can give them 10 points when you've got a quarterback that's giving away points at every opportunity.
My brain's not functioning right now. Is the game in Athens or is the game in Knoxville?
The game is in Athens.
Okay, so that's 3 of your points of that 10-point spread, just for home field advantage. I don't. Carson Beck is going to have to play much better than Carson Beck has played since the Texas, or actually since the first half of the Texas game, for Georgia to win, because Tennessee has a good offense and will score points on the Georgia defense. I believe that's going to happen. And so Carson Beck's going to be in a position where he's going to have to answer some drives. And for the last few weeks, it really hasn't been his game. And I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know if it's a situation of him not reading his receivers right, or him just playing chuck and duck and trying not to get hurt because I'm going to the NFL in a few months. I don't think that's the case, but who knows? But it's going to be a situation where Carson Beck is going to have to win that game. I don't think Georgia's defense is going to be able to carry them through what Tennessee's offense could potentially do. Now, for the 2 of us, we want Georgia to win, because that puts the 2 of us at 1 loss and everybody else at least 2. And I mean, this going to, if I remember the standings right, that's going to put like 6 teams at 2 losses. So at some point, it's going to get crazy to find out who that second team in the SEC championship is. But that would put, assuming both teams take care of their business this week and next, Texas and A&M playing for a spot in the SEC championship game, which is frankly a great story on November 30th.
And a situation where even the loser of that game could get a slot in the SEC championship.
Well,
you could see Texas and A&M play 3 times this year.
Yeah, that's still a thing that could happen. So I'm torn, honestly, because it would not hurt me if Georgia picked up its 3rd loss, and they could start figuring out if they're going to go to the Tax Slayer Bowl or which.
I hope they get to the Beef O'Brady Bowl because that's just fun.
I don't think the SEC has an affiliation with them, but I'm not really sure, and I can't remember how the Sugar Bowl works. But there's a lot going on. I don't know if that whole SEC Big 12. Well, our highest ranked non-champions will meet in the Sugar Bowl if it's not a playoff game agreement is going to go this year. So who knows who Alabama and LSU could end up playing. I mean, it's there's a whole lot of stuff going on. But I like the idea of Georgia being out of it. But I know it's a head and heart thing. My head knows that we probably want Tennessee to lose.
Yeah.
But I don't really like Georgia or Kirby Smart, so we'll have to see. My wife would be happy if Tennessee won, so I have to give a little bit of credit to that.
Yeah. At least I don't live in a divided household. That's easy.
She only cares when the two teams play, but that during that week every few years, it's not great.
It's not great. Well, there also is the fear that Georgia's the kind of team that if it gets in could get dangerous. I do agree that it's better right now for them to just be more chaos. I just think it's interesting that Carson Beck is going to go to the NFL. Right now, he is 30th in QBR, but first in size of head to body ratio because he looks like he'd pants. No.
Well, it's going to be really interesting because he has that floopy hair and it's pulled back, but you can tell the hairline is starting to recede a little bit more than his offensive line is. So there's going to be a lot of forehead for him to deal with a little bit later in life. And I'm talking like within the next 10 years. So good luck to him.
Good luck.
As somebody who is not follically challenged, I say a little prayer.
Yeah. I mean, that's the gloriousness of the hair level on this show is just fantastic. So I don't know. We are lucky in that regard. All right, Andy, that's going to wrap us up. Obviously, I think A&M takes care. I think A&M covers.
I will say I'm glad for your own personal safety that you're not going to Vietnam this week because Scott's going to hate when I say this, but Arkansas is the Texas Tech of the SEC, and frankly, Fayetteville, as lovely as it is off campus, is a lot like going to Lubbock. A lot like Jones. No tortillas, but just as many batteries.
What about the cow smell that just sort of permeates everything? Is there at least not that?
No, it's more like meth smoke from what I recall. We have had the fortune of not having to play them in Arkansas since our second year in the league. We've had to do the Jerry Bowl thing.
Yeah.
But 2013, it was an interesting place.
Oh my!
And they really hate you guys.
They really do.
It's going to be one of those things where if they manage to pull off a win, it doesn't matter what happens the rest of their season. They're going to consider it a good season.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I don't understand why they feel that way. 1970 was a long time ago.
Because 1970 is 54 years ago. Of course it matters.
Yes, of course it does. All right, Andy, hook 'em horns. Let's go. You throw your gig 'em up and let's get out of here. We will see you guys next week. And then the week after that, we will be I love how we've never mentioned the game. We just said the game on November 30th. Yeah. So we'll be back. But
it's called building up the tension for your audience, Jim. I know as a writer you understand that.
I do. It's also building up my ulcer, but we'll get there. You know how it is. All right, for
Happy
Andy
football Saturday.
That's right. Have a great football Saturday. We'll see you next week.